Hey, what is up, Patreon? It's Rich. All right, so this is an extension of the video that I uploaded yesterday to YouTube, and I'm just going to do it for Patreon this morning because I'm getting my feet wet with this whole process. But yesterday, I went through visually X-Men, Uncanny X-Men 162. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll actually have a link in the description box where you can check it out. So my concept for this look at the X-Men is I find the X-Men as a title, I think one of the best superhero team books around. I love the characters. I love the just the whole scope of it. I think that there's just a lot of great things about the X-Men. But also what's amazing about the X-Men is it's a fantastic title to really follow the evolution of comic book art. And so anyway, I started with it's a Chris Claremont written, Dave Cockrum, Bob Wyacek comic, and yesterday I just looked through it. I'd never read it. I'm jumping into the middle of the Uncanny X-Men. I have no idea really what's going on. I know the characters really probably more all at a surface level where like name recognition, what they visually look like, and maybe a little bit of their back history. So in terms of my knowledge base on the X-Men, it's very, very low. Very low. So this is where I started reading the X-Men, and I read this full comic this morning. This was a great comic book. I loved it yesterday just based on what I had seen. After reading it, I'm like, man, this was badass. And honestly, about 2 or 3 pages in, I was kind of like going, oh man, I don't know, this might not be that good. It was really good, so I was wrong. But just it's like they always recap Wolverine's like he's like I'm a mutant, I've got adamantium, blah blah blah, and you're like, oh god, like does every comic book have to like rehash this? But it didn't matter. The story was great. So again, we hop in at a point where Wolverine is in this like I don't know. I thought it was the Savage Land initially, but it's something far weirder, almost like a hallucinatory world that this planet either creates. You kind of it rolls out and you start to see kind of what's going on. But anyway, it's this just fantastical weird fantasy land. And he's being hunted by basically the landscape initially, and so he gets in a fight with these plant like objects that are trying to basically devour him. And when he cuts up the body of it, these spores come out and it infects him, and it's pretty creepy. And man, I have to say, Chris Claremont, man, he is a great writer. I haven't read much of his stuff, and I know he's like super famous and respected, but this will be kind of like my real starting point with it. I own a lot of comics that he's written, but generally I just look at the art. So anyway, so Wolverine gets drugged up and he starts hallucinating immediately. So he flashes back to Japan and his love, or I don't know if they ever got married. I think that they eventually did get married, but I think at this point they're just sort of like boyfriend and girlfriend in this hallucination. So she's talking about not feeling worthy of him, and he's saying like, oh, you know what, you're the bravest woman I know. And this is where it starts to blend reality and it's really cool. So anyway, they see these huge eagles like flying towards them, and he feels they're very exposed. They're basically on the top of like a bluff, and he's saying that there's no cover. And then they morph into like the Brood, and he calls them something else. He calls him something else the whole book. We'll see what he refers to him as. But anyway, these guys show up, and if you look, they actually have distinct markings on their heads. So each one has got like a little bit of a different symbol. That'll be kind of important later. And I think about the next page. Yeah, it was right about here. I realized because my goal was to like read 2 comic books each day. But what I found I was doing, and this is something that will be kind of important for all of you if you're going to try to do this kind of idea, I wasn't really paying attention to the art. I was just reading the story, and I was like, okay, 2 comic books, read them fast, get back to your drawing. But the point of me reading them is to sort of like not only take in the story, but take in the thought process behind these different pencilers and how they approach what they were challenged to draw and how they did it. So I immediately had to like shift gears and go, okay, you're not only reading this, but like pay attention to the art, because it's not just about like finishing reading the story. So anyway, so Wolverine starts to fight these guys, and they're bouncing around, and of course he's constantly talking about his body and his claws, and these are pretty creepy monsters, which I've seen visually, and I knew what they were called based on how they looked, but I don't really know their abilities. So it was interesting, seeing their powers. Like they're pretty highly intelligent. They're definitely sort of like they can use weapons. They have built-in defense mechanisms, and they're the predatory capabilities of them is super high. So it's pretty interesting. So anyway, he's getting pretty beat up by them, which isn't uncommon for any Wolverine fight, and he falls away from them, and as he's trying to sort of catch his fall, of course it doesn't go well for him, and he ends up in this weird like spider web kind of thing way below them. And when I went through the video yesterday and was just kind of looking at it, I didn't really absorb kind of exactly what was going on here, but reading it, it's like it takes on a whole new sort of thing. But so this double page spread was totally fascinating to me after I read the story, because of what excuse me, happens next. So he's caught in the webs, he's passed out, and he kind of like comes to and he comes to the realization that he survived, but as he starts to look around, so you survived, but you're still in hell. He talks about being burned by 1,000,000 degrees of temperature, 1,000,000,000. Like, what's the difference? It's still going to hurt, and you're going to be dead ultimately. But so this is a really fascinating shot. So you see him in the web, and it keeps kind of pointing out. But look at this panel. I didn't notice this yesterday, but so this black panel, it's got like a thing, and it shows you where he's located in this huge scene. And I thought that was so freaking cool, and I didn't realize that this is like a big like kind of creepy manta ray thing with its like rib cage open. And what this is a huge animal the brood has used as like a host, and as the corpse is rotting, it was one of their ships, I believe. Yeah, so it's a living starship, but he was saying that it would take an eternity for this planet to even completely have it like decay. So I thought that was really cool, and I love the fact that you sort of see where he is in this whole scene. I thought that was really cool. It's an unusual storytelling beat, and so then he starts to have these hallucinations, and all of a sudden he's back on, like, I guess the X-Men's ship. Oh, he keeps calling them sleazoids. But I think it's Ilyana. Like, he's on, like, Ilyana's ship. Is that right? The Ferris gratitude. So essentially what happens is he keeps running into X-Men in this, like, fantasy that he's having, and each one of them sort of is abducted and then sort of killed or destroyed or harmed in a different way. And it's pretty creepy. And so I saw something, I think it was on this page, that they were saying that Colossus's sister is Deathbird. Maybe I'm wrong with that. Let me see what it says. I think this is the page. Are you guys fighting? Stop. Was it on this page? I think it's on the next page. But yeah, they're kind of like having this party, and they're all like hanging out together. And again, different sort of threats keep sort of taking the different X-Men characters and then doing them harm. And then Wolverine kind of like snaps out of it, and like it's like he's the whole book he's having like these head pains. So now it kind of flashes back to like what's really going on for him, and these predators are about to come get him, and he kills them, and then basically the threats basically realize that he's too much work to sort of like try to finish him off, and now there's all these dead other creatures that he's killed, so they're just going to prey on them instead. So they kind of like they sort of cannibalize their own. So he starts to escape from it. He's exhausted, and he passes out, and then he starts having more fantasies, and he wakes up in this bed, and then as he looks out the window, he realizes that he's still in the world, and like all this weird stuff is going on. He runs into Storm, and he's talking to her, and he knows that something's up, and it's not really Storm, and he knocks her out. Like, they don't show it, but he says he basically gives her like a nerve pinch and KO'd her, which I thought was kind of interesting that they didn't show it. So anyway, but he dismissed his story out of hand, and that's way out of character for her. So he knows that something's going on, and it's really weird. So at this point, he has a fantasy about killing Kitty Pryde, which is completely bizarre. But he sees her in bed, and he's talking about how amazing she is, and she's such a brave kid and stuff like that. He wanted to take her with him, but he couldn't, so she was better off sort of like sleeping. But then at this point he says, but then he has an image flashes through his mind that he's like holding her, and he basically takes her out. It's weird stuff. So anyway, then it cuts to this with the Brood, and they've got this character Fang, who I guess is like an X-Men sort of, I think he's a nemesis, right? A cadre of sleazoids had gathered for a ceremony. The object of their attention was an old foe of the X-Men, a renegade member of I always call her Liliandra, but I don't know if that's right. I think it's Lilandra, Imperial Guard Fang. So anyway, but he starts to smoke, and what they've done is they've basically used him as a host for this brood egg that is basically inside of him, and he just completely, like, look at his face. He like sort of starts to turn reptilian, and then this thing busts out of him, and it's pretty creepy and pretty insane. So and he's like saying, hey, I'm an ally of yours, and they're like, we don't need allies. Like, it's like da 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 da. And then they see Wolverine watching this whole thing. Again, I think this is all sort of in his hallucinations. So they start to chase him. He goes to escape. Oh, okay. And then like he gets out of there, but the Fang hosted sleazoid, if you want to call it, is starting to move. It's got its wings, and it's about ready to take its first flight. And so Wolverine sees this as an opportunity to actually hop onto it and try to fly up out of the area that he's stuck in. So he basically cuts off its like stingers. You see that? And then basically tells it that he'll kill it if it doesn't fly him to where he wants to go. So it starts to do it, but Wolverine's head pains flare up again, and then he's out of commission, and this thing flips him off and throws him into a big batch of the Brood. It's a really, really nice drawn panel, actually. But do you see how much is going on in this story just for one comic book? I mean, this is really, really insane, and it was quite fun to read, honestly. I'm really looking forward to 163. And then, Wolverine, he's like all jacked up. I think at this point he starts to realize that what's going on with him is that he's a host of this same virus that basically just destroyed Fang. And so he kills all the Brood that are after him, but he knows that there's far more. And again, the pain flashes up again, and he starts the transformation. He's basically a host to this egg, and it's going to take him over. And so you can kind of like see the process. His body starts to fight it, though, because his skeleton is made of adamantium. He in his what do you call it? Recuperation skills are like so high, his body starts to fight it. So there's this moment where it's like him versus this sort of virus, and he breaks free of it. But what was interesting is, so he wakes up at sunrise, and he realized that he's lived through this. But if you look, he's different now. He actually has some reptilian Brood-like features on him. And anyway, he's like, you lose, Queenie, your egg didn't hatch. I survived it. But he's actually super jacked up. And then he says, he goes, this could be the fate of the X-Men. Like maybe the fantasy of them all on the ship and each one of them being sort of consumed by the same thing is really going on, and he doesn't know how many are in this ship here, are already dead or have transformed. And then he basically says, and if I remember my hallucination about killing Kitty, if I have to, and she can't be cured, I'll do it. That's a great cliffhanger. I'll kill them all. I'll kill them all, my friends. Then it'll be the Sleazoid's turn. Sorry, it's hard to read through the camera sometimes. But what a great issue. And then here we go. This is the next issue. So anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. I thought that this would be fun, and again, it was really, really important for me, one, to step back and realize not only to read the comic book, but to really pay attention to the storytelling choices that are going on here. So it's something that now that I've recorded this video, I can kind of watch it back and even soak it in more. But, I want to be aware of the shots, the lighting, the pull-ins and the pull-outs and the close-ups and all that stuff. So, there's multiple levels of it, and just reading 3 comic books or 2 comic books really quickly each day isn't going to really serve a purpose. It could fall into the category of what have we talked about, like just sitting and drawing 1,000 hands because you're going to do it, because you're going to draw 1,000 hands. Yeah, I think that there's a long-term benefit to that to some extent, but there might be better approaches to it. So that's just a theory. You use it the way that you want. And okay, I'll be back tomorrow with the 163 video. I'm going to read it first, and it'll go just on regular YouTube. But man, 162 is great. And now I'm wondering if I should go back further, but I think I'm just going to move forward from here. And I'm excited. Really excited. I definitely have this comic book, like the normal version of it. I remember this cover and even the colors on it. So it's a good chance I have 162 as a floppy as well. All right, have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.